She was only number 37291 until a human made her Moan her true name. This is HFY. Lean closer, the story's about to get intimate. The mining colony of Terrior 9 looked like a wound carved into the flesh of the galaxy. Rust-colored rocks stretched as far as the eye could see, stripped bare of any natural beauty. Smokestacks pierced the amber sky, belching toxins that turned the horizon into a perpetual haze. To the miners forced to work here, it was a prison. To the administrators who oversaw it, it was profit. To Captain James Hunt, arriving aboard his dropship, it was just another assignment, a place where disaster had struck, and lives were hanging by a thread. The Galactic Emergency Response Unit had dispatched him after reports of a catastrophic dam failure. Terrior 9 depended on an enormous reservoir to power its hydro-extraction systems, and if the dam collapsed, hundreds of laborers would be drowned before anyone could even attempt a rescue. James's ship sliced through the smog, its engines screaming against the planet's dense atmosphere. He sat in the cockpit, eyes hard on the blinking beacon that marked the emergency coordinates. Approaching target zone, he muttered into his comm. His voice was steady, but even through the reinforced canopy, he could see the danger looming. The dam wall was bulging outward, spiderweb fractures running across its surface. Jets of water already spurted from the cracks, spraying into the valley below. Dozens of alien figures scrambled ineffectively near the base of the wall, thin-limbed, gray-skinned Zorians. They were administrators, not workers. The workers were nowhere in sight. That told James everything he needed to know. They build these operations with slave labor, he said under his breath, but can't be bothered to invest in safe infrastructure. His jaw tightened. He'd seen this pattern too many times in too many corners of the galaxy. Slaves were cheap. Replacing them was cheaper than preventing accidents. The ship thudded down on a landing platform overlooking the dam. James Rose strapped himself into a sand-colored exosuit and felt the servos hum to life. Terror 9's gravity was heavier than Earth's, but with the suit compensating, he felt as strong as a titan. He stepped out into the acrid air. A thin Zorian official hurried toward him, robes flapping. His gray skin shimmered under the harsh light. Captain Hunt, thank the stars you've come. The situation is most dire. Brief me, James demanded, already striding toward the edge of the platform for a better look. The primary control mechanism is failing, the Zorian said breathlessly. If it gives way, the entire complex will flood. We have over 300 workers below. Workers, James shot him a hard look. You mean slaves? The administrator flushed a darker gray. We prefer the term indentured laborers. James snorted. Call it whatever helps you sleep at night. He turned his visor toward the dam, scanning the readouts. The strain was immense. One wrong move and the wall would burst. I'm going down there. Get your people clear. Before the official could protest, James activated his jump jets. Fire flared from his suit as he leapt from the platform, hurtling down toward the control station, clinging to the side of the dam. The roar of water grew louder with every second. He landed with a bone-jarring thud, boots locking to the metal grating. And that was when he saw her. A lone figure stood at the lever that controlled the emergency floodgates. She was small, barely more than a silhouette against the tremoring machinery. Her arms trembled violently as she tried to keep the mechanism from slipping. Bright orange skin gleamed with sweat, streaked with grime. Intricate silver markings traced across her flesh, like circuitry, glowing faintly as if alive. Her hair, silver white, clung wetly to her face. Her clothing was little more than a torn work suit, thin fabric stretched across a frame that was too gaunt, too malnourished. James's visor highlighted her vital signs: elevated heart rate, muscle fatigue, oxygen deprivation. She was dying on her feet. He dropped beside her, her blue eyes startling, brilliant against her orange skin, widened at his sudden arrival. She stiffened as he moved behind her, wrapping his arms around hers to help brace the lever. Hold on, he shouted over the thunder of the dam. We've got this together. For a heartbeat, she froze. No one had touched her in kindness for years. But then she leaned into the support, her body trembling, as if unsure whether to collapse or fight. It's going to break, she cried. Her accent was heavy, but her words were clear. The pressure is too much. Not today, James growled, activating the exosuit's strength boosters. The servos whined as power surged through the mechanical frame. He bore down on the lever, forcing it back into place. "What's your name?" he asked, straining. The question hit her like a physical blow. Her lips parted soundlessly. No one had asked her that in years since the day she'd been captured and reduced to a number. Finally, she whispered, "Amira. I am called Amira." "Well, Amira," James said through gritted teeth, "I'm James Hunt, and I'm getting you out of this mess." A deafening crack split the air as a fissure ripped across the dam wall. Water sprayed in gouts, nearly knocking them from their feet. Amira's cry was raw with despair. "It's failing." James scanned frantically. His visor highlighted a maintenance hatch 20 feet away, half submerged. "Amira, what does that panel say?" He gestured to the control board nearby. She flicked her eyes to it, reading the alien script. "The secondary release valve is jammed, if you could clear it." "Hold this as long as you can," James ordered, shifting his grip. "No," she gasped, nearly sagging as the weight pressed back onto her alone. But she forced her trembling muscles to hold sweat pouring down her face. James sprinted for the hatch. The rising water surged around his ankles. He yanked the door open and dove into the flooded tunnel. His suit lights cut through the murky depths. Every second mattered. The valve loomed ahead, massive, jammed with debris. He grabbed it, straining with everything the exosuit could provide. Warning lights flared red across his visor. Power reserves drained rapidly, the metal grown stubborn as stone. "Come on," he snarled. With a final surge, the wheel turned. Water roared through the channels, relieving the pressure on the main wall. James pushed back through the tunnel lungs, burning until his helmet filled with fresh air again. He clambered out onto the platform. The lever had stabilized. Amira was still there, barely conscious, but the dam was holding. Her eyes lifted to his wide with disbelief. "You came back." "Told you I would," James said simply. He took her weight as she collapsed, catching her in strong arms. Her skin was hot against the cold plating of his suit, her body feather light. For the first time, he saw the truth on her face. Exhaustion, relief, and a flicker, tiny fragile of hope. "Why did you help me?" she whispered. "I am nothing, just a mind slave." James's chest tightened with anger. He forced his voice gentle. "No one is just anything, Amira. And where I come from, we don't leave people behind." Above them, the thrum of engines signaled approaching Zorian officials. The moment of fragile connection would not last. But as James held her trembling body against him, he knew this was only the beginning. The roar of engines overhead grew louder, vibrating through the metal beneath James's boots. Hover platforms descended, carrying Zorian officials in flowing gray robes. Their faces were unreadable masks, eyes cool and detached as they surveyed the damage. At the front stood Administrator Pelk, the same one who had greeted James at the landing platform. His thin lips curved in relief when he saw the dam stabilized. "Magnificent work," Captain Hunt. Pelk called, his voice booming over the comm system. "The Zorian Mining Consortium is in your debt." James adjusted his grip on Amira, her head lolling weakly against his chest. "I'm not the hero here," he replied, his voice hard. "She held that lever for who knows how long before I arrived. She saved your entire operation." Pelk's gaze flicked to the trembling woman in James's arms. His expression soured. "Yes, well, the property will be returned to its assigned section now that the emergency is over." James's head snapped around, eyes narrowing. "Property." His voice was low, dangerous. "She just saved hundreds of lives." "It was merely performing its designated function," Pelk said dismissively, raising one thin gray hand. Two security officers moved forward, weapons slung at their sides. "Now release it to the guards." James tightened his hold around Amira protectively. "Her," he corrected, his voice a growl. "And she's coming with me." The officials froze, shocked at his defiance. Amira stirred slightly, her blue eyes fluttering open. She looked up at James, disbelief written across her face. No one had ever spoken of her as anything but a tool. No one had ever claimed her as a person worth defending. A flicker of something new hope ignited in her eyes, so fragile, it seemed it might shatter at a single harsh word. "She is registered property of the Zorian Mining Consortium." Pelk snapped, anger seeping into his voice. His fingers tapped rapidly against a data pad at his side. "There are protocols, Captain Hunt. Procedures. She cannot simply be taken. James shifted his stance, planting his boots firmly on the slick platform. He lifted his helmet from his head, revealing sharp green eyes and a jawline shadowed with stubble. His stare locked onto Pelk's unflinching. "I'm invoking Article 17 of the Galactic Emergency Response Charter," he said, voice carrying across the platform like thunder. "Any individual who assists GRU personnel during a crisis becomes a protected person under our jurisdiction for a minimum evaluation period of 72 hours. Pelk's mouth opened and closed, his skin flushing darker. "That article is meant for free citizens who volunteer their assistance, not for—" "The article doesn't specify citizenship status," James cut in voice like steel. "And I don't see the words "accept slaves" anywhere in the text. Do you?" A murmur rippled through the gathering crowd. Zorian officials shifted uneasily. Even the guards glanced at one another, uncertainty in their eyes. James felt Amira trembling against him, whether from fear or exhaustion, he couldn't tell. He angled his body slightly, shielding her from their gazes. "This is highly irregular," Pelk sputtered. "I must consult with my superiors." "Consult away," James said, lips curling into a grim smile. "In the meantime, Amira remains under GRU protection. I'll be taking her to my ship for medical evaluation." He touched the side of his helmet, reactivating the comm. "Hunt to dropship. Immediate extraction from my position." "Copy that, Captain," came the pilot's voice. "Inbound 30 seconds." The roar of engines cut through Pelk's sputtering protests as the dropship descended, turbines blasting dust and spray into the air. James shifted Amira in his arms, her slight weight nothing against the exosuit's power. Her arms instinctively curled around his neck as he bent his knees and activated the jump jets. Flame flared beneath him, propelling them upward in a soaring arc toward the waiting craft. They landed hard on the deck as the hatch sealed shut behind them. The roar of engines rose as the ship lifted off, leaving the furious officials shouting wordlessly below. The bay quieted. Only the thrum of the dropship remained vibrating softly through the deck plates. James set Amira gently onto a medical cot kneeling beside her. She blinked, her blue eyes dazed but focused on his face. "Thank you," she whispered. "No one has ever stood up for me before." James peeled off his gauntlets, his large hands suddenly bare, human vulnerable. "How long have you been here, Amira?" Her eyes dropped to the silver markings on her wrist, tracing them with trembling fingers. 7 cycles, she said softly. "I was captured during a raid on my home colony. They add a new mark each year." Her voice broke. 7 years of slavery. James's chest burned with anger, quickly followed by determination. "Well," he said firmly, "that ends today." For the first time she smiled. It was faint, fragile, but it transformed her face. Despite the grime and exhaustion, James realized how striking she was. The silver hair against orange skin, the fierce light flickering back into those blue eyes. He cleared his throat, suddenly self-conscious. "Sorry, I've never met anyone from your species before." "We are called Calorans," she replied, her voice carrying a quiet pride. The word felt like a prayer on her lips, as if simply saying it reclaimed a piece of her stolen identity. "Calorans," James repeated, letting the sound settle. "Well, Amira the Caloran, let's get you cleaned up and checked out." The dropship's medical bay was compact but efficient, its systems designed for emergency treatment. James helped Amira to the cleansing chamber, a high-tech shower that used fine mists and energy pulses to strip contaminants and heal superficial wounds. He turned to leave, but her hand caught his wrist. The touch startled him, electric in its simplicity. "I don't know how to operate this," she admitted softly, eyes lowering in embarrassment. James hesitated. He was a soldier trained to fight and rescue, not to navigate fragile moments of trust like this. But he nodded, guiding her gently. "It's simple. Just step inside here," he demonstrated, showing how to activate the mist with a gesture. She obeyed, stepping into the chamber. The translucent walls fogged as the mist enveloped her, washing away years of grime. Amira closed her eyes, breathing deeply. A sound escaped her lips, a sigh long and trembling that carried both relief and grief. James turned away, giving her privacy, but her words stopped him. "James." He froze, glancing back through the hazy mist. Her silhouette was slender, yet strong, etched with the hardship she had endured. "Thank you for seeing me as a person." Something shifted in that moment. A bond tenuous but undeniable spark between them. James's throat tightened. He forced his voice steady. Always, he said quietly. Always. While Amira cleansed herself, James opened a channel to Geru headquarters. He explained the situation, invoking Article 17 formally, and requested diplomatic backup. By the time Amira emerged wrapped in a standard-issue robe that hung loosely around her frame, he had news. Geru is backing my claim, he told her. We're heading to the orbital station. Representatives from the Galactic Council are waiting. Her eyes widened in disbelief. The council for me. For you, James confirmed. He reached up, tucking a strand of damp silver hair behind her ear. The gesture was instinctive, intimate, his fingers lingering longer than necessary. Amira leaned into the touch before she realized it, then drew back quickly, unsure of the new emotion stirring inside her. My people have a saying, she said softly. The strongest chains are broken by the gentlest hands. Her fingers brushed his chest right over his heart. I never understood until now. The ship's comm crackled. Captain Hunt approaching the orbital station. Officials request immediate docking. James straightened, though his eyes stayed locked with hers. Tell them we'll dock when I'm good and ready. Amira smiled then, not the timid smile of before, but something brighter, more confident. It lit her face like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. James's heart stumbled in his chest. For the first time, she looked less like a slave and more like a woman ready to change the galaxy. With you, she whispered, her hand finding his. I'm ready for anything. The orbital station loomed ahead like a crown of steel and lights suspended against the black void. Docking arms extended, guiding the dropship into one of the hangar bays. The moment the hatch opened, James felt the shift in atmosphere. Gone was the acrid air of Terrior 9. Here the air was cool, sterile, humming faintly with the energy of countless systems. But tension hung heavier than gravity. Waiting for them at the docking platform was a delegation of Zorian officials led by High Administrator Vaughn, a tall, imposing figure with elaborate silver markings etched across his gray skin. His expression was carved from stone, his eyes hard and unyielding. James stepped forward, one hand steady at Amira's back. High Administrator Vaughn, he greeted curtly. I appreciate your willingness to convene this hearing. The consortium takes allegations of impropriety very seriously, Captain Hunt Vaughn said, his voice smooth, rehearsed. But invoking Article 17 for a labor asset is unprecedented. His eyes flicked to Amira as though she were nothing more than a malfunctioning tool. James's jaw tightened. That's precisely why we're here, to establish precedent. They were escorted through gleaming corridors into a vast amphitheater chamber. Tiered seating encircled a central platform already filled with representatives from multiple species, a towering Tyran with blue-tinted skin, a pair of insectoid Vespari clicking softly in their seats, and most importantly, a human woman in formal robes. Ambassador Porter of the Galactic Council. Relief flickered through James's chest at the sight of her. Captain Hunt, Porter said warmly as he approached. Geru speaks highly of you, though they did mention your tendency to complicate simple rescue missions. James allowed himself a faint smile. Just doing my job, ma'am. Her eyes shifted to Amira, who instinctively moved closer to James, fingers brushing the fabric of his sleeve, as though to anchor herself. And this must be the Caloran in question. Her name, James said gently, is Amira. Amira straightened at the sound of her name. The word seemed to strengthen her spine, reminding her she was not a number anymore. The hearing began with formality and ritual. High Administrator Vaughn presented the Zorian position, first his voice echoing through the chamber. This individual is legally acquired property under Zorian law. The mining operation is vital to galactic commerce, and human interference threatens to destabilize an entire sector. The Council must respect the sovereignty of Zorian jurisdiction. When it was James's turn, he stepped onto the central platform with Amira at his side. His hand rested at the small of her back, firm, supportive. His voice carried across the chamber, crisp and commanding. The Galactic Charter, to which Zoria is a signatory, explicitly prohibits the enslavement of sentient beings. The classification of Calorans as labor assets rather than people is a transparent attempt to circumvent this prohibition. Vaughn leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Calorans are not recognized as a protected species under the Charter. They have no legal standing. Because Zoria has systematically blocked their application for recognition, Ambassador Porter interjected smoothly. A conflict of interest this council finds troubling. A ripple of murmurs spread through the assembly. Vaughn's expression darkened. Amira's breath quickened, her blue eyes darting nervously from face to face. The vast chamber filled with so many powerful beings staring at her made her feel exposed naked. James bent close, his voice low. Are you all right? There are so many of them, she whispered, looking at me like I'm nothing. James took her hand and squeezed gently. You're not nothing. You're everything that's right about this case. Their eyes met, and for a moment the noise of the chamber faded. The strength she found in his gaze steadied her trembling. Vaughn's voice cut through. If this being is truly sentient, let it speak for itself. He said it with deliberate contempt, a blade meant to cut. James bristled but turned to Amira. You don't have to, he told her softly. It's your choice. Amira swallowed hard, her shoulders squared. For 7 years she had been silenced, reduced to a number. This was her chance to reclaim her voice. She stepped forward, the light glinting off the silver markings on her skin. My name is Amira. She began, her voice soft but steady. I was born on Caller Prime, daughter to scholars. When the Zorian ships came, I was studying ancient texts. I had never held a weapon. I had never harmed anyone. The chamber quieted, every eye fixed on her. Her silver markings shimmered faintly as though her body itself was speaking. They took me, she continued, voice growing stronger, in thousands of my people. We were stripped of our names. I was given a number 37,291. For 7 years I answered to that number. Not a word, not a name. Until yesterday when a human man looked at me and asked what I was called. As if it mattered. As if I mattered. James felt his throat tighten, pride and sorrow colliding inside him. You ask if I am sentient, Amira said, her voice ringing now. I ask you, would a non-sentient being remember the smell of her mother's cooking? Would she dream of seeing the stars again? Would she learn your language just to curse you in silence with every breath? A shocked murmur swept the chamber. Even Ambassador Porter's lips curved in satisfaction. The humans saved more than my life yesterday, Amira concluded. Her blue eyes swept the assembly, defiant and unbroken. He reminded me that I have one. When she returned to James's side, her hand sought his instinctively. Their fingers intertwined, a gesture both intimate and unshakable. The electricity of the touch coursed through him. He had faced battles, explosions, and death, but nothing had ever felt as dangerous or as right as this. The hearing dragged on for hours. Legal arguments flew back and forth, each side twisting the charter into knots. During a recess, James guided Amira into a smaller chamber away from the noise. You were incredible, he told her, admiration plain in his voice. Amira managed a smile this time, one that reached her eyes. I had a good teacher. You humans, she said after a pause, you have this fire, this refusal to accept injustice. Not all of us, James admitted, but I like to think it's our better nature. She stepped closer, her hand resting lightly on his chest. There is something else I've noticed about humans. You feel things so deeply it radiates from you like heat. Her fingers traced lightly over his heart. My people believe in soul resonance. When two beings are aligned, their essences vibrate at the same frequency. James covered her hand with his own, his breath catching. And what does that feel like? Her eyes locked on his. Like this, she whispered. She rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, soft, a question unspoken. But when James pulled her closer, it deepened the universe, narrowing to just the two of them. Different worlds, different species, yet somehow they fit. When they parted, breathless, Amira's eyes were wide with wonder. I've never felt anything like that. Neither have I, James admitted, his forehead resting against hers. And I've kissed my share of humans. She laughed softly, the sound like music breaking a long silence. Is that supposed to reassure me? It's supposed to tell you, James murmured, that this he gestured between them is something special. The chime of the recess ending broke the moment. Reality pressed back in. Amira touched his cheek, her expression solemn, yet hopeful. For the first time in 7 years, she whispered, I believe in tomorrow. Hand in hand, they walked back into the chamber to hear their fate. When the tribunal reconvened, Ambassador Porter's voice rang clear. The ruling of this council is as follows. Amira of Keller is hereby recognized as a sentient being with full rights under the Galactic Charter. Her detention by the Zorian Mining Consortium is deemed unlawful. She is granted immediate and unconditional freedom. Gasps rippled through the chamber. James squeezed Amira's hand as tears welled in her eyes. Furthermore, Porter continued, the consortium is ordered to pay reparations for 7 years of unlawful detention and forced labor. High Administrator Vaughn's face darkened to stormy gray. And what of the other Calorans? Porter's expression remained carefully neutral. The tribunal finds insufficient evidence to make a blanket ruling. Each case must be individually reviewed by a joint commission. The words struck James like a hammer, hundreds still enslaved. It could take years. But Amira's hand was still in his, trembling, yet firm. She was free, and together they would find a way to free the rest. The verdict echoed through Amira's mind long after the chamber emptied. Free. The word felt unreal, as though it belonged to someone else. For 7 years she had been 37,291, a number etched into her skin and her soul. Now in the span of a single day, she was Amira again. Yet joy did not come as easily as she imagined. As James led her from the hearing room, she caught sight of Vaughn's cold glare, the Zorian's thin lips twisting into a promise of retaliation. The council's ruling had freed her, yes, but the rest of her people remained chained in the mines. That truth pressed against her newfound liberty like a weight she couldn't shake. James noticed her silence as they walked through the station's sterile corridors. You should be proud, he said gently. What you did in there, it changed everything. Amira looked up at him, her blue eyes shadowed. Changed everything for me, not for them. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. She was right, and the words he wanted to offer, comfort, reassurance, felt hollow against such a reality. Instead, he simply took her hand. She didn't pull away. Their quarters on the station were modest but comfortable, a narrow suite with a bed, a desk, and a viewport that overlooked Terrior 9 far below. The planet's surface gleamed faintly, rivers of molten orange threading through its crust like veins of fire. From this distance, it seemed beautiful, but Amira knew the truth of its ugliness better than anyone alive. James watched her as she pressed her palms to the glass. Her silver markings shimmered faintly in the reflected starlight. What are you thinking, he asked. That I should feel happy, she said softly. But all I feel is guilt. You've earned this freedom, Amira, James said firmly. That doesn't diminish the fight still ahead. One step at a time. She turned to him, her expression fragile yet fierce. I can't abandon them, not after everything. And I can't abandon you, James answered without hesitation. The intensity in his green eyes startled her. For a long moment, they simply stared at one another, the unspoken heavy between them. Then Amira looked away, struggling with emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. That night, James worked late drafting reports for Jerry Yu and communicating with Ambassador Porter. By the time he finally powered down his terminal, the room was quiet. He found Amira sitting at the edge of the bed, her robe folded neatly beside her. She looked up, her silver hair catching the faint glow of the viewport's light. You're exhausted, he said softly. So are you. He hesitated, then sat beside her. The silence stretched between them, filled with the hum of the station's systems and the weight of everything unsaid. At last, Amira broke it. Do you ever wonder, she asked quietly, what freedom means when you've never known it? James's throat tightened. Freedom means choice, he said. The ability to decide for yourself what happens next. Her eyes searched his face as though weighing his words against the sincerity in his gaze. Slowly, she reached out her fingertips, brushing his hand. And what if my choice is you? The air shifted. James felt his heartbeat hammer against his ribs. He had been trained for combat, for rescue, for negotiation with hostile species. But this fragile moment of trust terrified him more than any battlefield. You don't have to, he began. I want to. She interrupted, her voice trembling but resolute. For years, my body was not mine. Every breath, every step, every touch was commanded. Tonight, for the first time, I wanted something because I choose it. Her words broke something inside him. Carefully, reverently, he lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her palm. Her silver markings pulsed faintly at the contact, glowing like starlight beneath his kiss. Her breath caught. In my culture, she whispered, that gesture is deeply intimate. In mine too, James said, his voice rough. The distance between them vanished. Their lips met, hesitant at first, then with rising urgency. Amira pressed closer, her hands fisting in the fabric of his shirt, as though anchoring herself to the moment. James wrapped his arms around her, one hand tangling in her silver hair, the other firm against the small of her back. When they finally broke apart, Amira's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I'm afraid," she confessed. "So am I," James admitted, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "But not of this." Her answering smile was fragile yet luminous. "Show me," she whispered. And he did. Slowly, gently, he let her set the pace. Every touch was deliberate, every kiss a vow that she was not property, not a number, but a woman worthy of tenderness and desire. She trembled beneath his hands, but it was not fear, it was release. For Amira, it was a revelation that intimacy could be healing, that love could be chosen, not forced. The silver markings across her skin glowed brighter as their connection deepened, responding to her emotions in ways that left James awestruck. It was as if her very essence was awakening, rediscovering what it meant to feel alive. Hours later, they lay tangled together beneath the sheets. Amira's head rested on his chest, her breath steady now, her fingers tracing idle patterns over his skin. "Your heart beats so fast," she murmured. "That's not my normal resting rate," James said with a tired laugh. "You have that effect on me." She smiled, propping herself up to look at him. "Is it always like this for humans?" "No," he said honestly. His gaze softened. "This is different, because it's you." Her smile faded into something more solemn. "What happens tomorrow?" James stared at the ceiling, torn between duty and desire. "I don't know," he admitted. "For the first time in my career, I don't know what the right call is." "Then perhaps we should stop thinking about tomorrow," she whispered, pressing a kiss to his lips and focus on tonight. But morning always comes. The light of the artificial sunrise streamed through the viewport, painting the room in gold. James sat on the edge of the bed, pulling on his uniform. Amira stirred, clutching the sheet to her chest. "What do you mean you're leaving?" she asked, her voice still husky with sleep. "I've been reassigned," James said, fastening the seals on his gauntlets. "The Proyon system, severe atmospheric disturbances. They want me there tomorrow." "And me? I've arranged passage to Earth, refugee status, housing, education, a chance to start fresh." He turned to meet her gaze. "You deserve that, Amira." She rose, the sheet falling away as she crossed to the viewport, her silhouette framed by starlight. "Is that what you want? For me to go live quietly on your world, while my people remain in chains?" "Amira," James began, but the words faltered. She turned, her eyes burning with determination. "I have responsibilities too, to testify for each case, to be the voice for those who have none. I will not abandon them." James stood, closing the distance between them. "That could take years," he said, echoing his earlier frustration with Ambassador Porter. "Then it takes years," she said fiercely, "unless there is another way." Their eyes locked, and James saw the fire in her, the same fire he'd felt when she stood before the council and claimed her name. It was the fire of someone who had been broken and had chosen to rise anyway. He cupped her face in his hands, pressing his forehead to hers. "Then we'll find another way. Together." The vow hung between them, unspoken yet undeniable. And in that moment, both knew that whatever choices lay ahead, they would not face them alone. The decision crystallized in James's mind like ice. He couldn't walk away. Orders or no orders, bureaucracy or no bureaucracy, hundreds of Calorans remained underground, their lives consumed by the same chains that had bound Amira. He found her in the suite's common room, sketching a rough map of the mining tunnels from memory onto a data pad. Her finger traced lines with certainty born of bitter experience. When she looked up, there was no hesitation in her eyes. "You've already decided," she said. James nodded. "I have. But I can't do it alone. We'll need a team, people I can trust, people who won't ask too many questions." A smile ghosted across her lips, sharp and determined. "Then let's find them." By midday, encrypted calls had been placed, and by evening, 3 figures arrived at the orbital station, each carrying the weight of old debts and shared battles. The first was Major Warren, tall and broad-shouldered, a dark scar cutting across his cheek like a reminder of survival. He clasped James's arm with the familiarity of an old comrade. "When you said unofficial op, I couldn't resist," he said with a grin. "Besides, I still owe you for Europa." The second was Talia Porter, compact and sharp-eyed, her short-cropped hair bristling with restless energy. Niece of Ambassador Porter, she had made her name as a security systems specialist and as someone who enjoyed outsmarting authority. The third was Dr. Chase Elliott, a medic whose calm presence contrasted with the chaos he often worked in. He had extensive experience treating non-human physiology, and his quiet eyes lingered on Amira with both curiosity and compassion. "Gentlemen, ladies," James said as they gathered in his quarters, "meet Amira, our inside source. 7 years in the mines. She knows the complex better than anyone alive." Dr. Elliott inclined his head, a caloran he murmured, clinical interest flickering in his gaze. "Remarkable. Your regenerative physiology is well documented, though I doubt anyone studied it ethically." "Not ethics," Talia muttered, scanning Amira with frank respect. "Survival." Amira acknowledged them with a solemn nod. "Not as brave as what you're risking for my people." The group leaned over the data pad as Amira traced out routes, chambers, and guard rotations. "The main entrance is heavily fortified," she explained, but here she pointed to a narrow line along the side of the complex. A ventilation shaft connects to the lower levels. Guards are minimal. They don't expect threats from inside. James studied it. "What about surveillance?" "Basic in the quarters," Amira replied. "But deeper down, they rely more on physical guards. The Zorians believe fear is stronger than cameras." "Their arrogance is our advantage," Talia said, her grin sharp. "I can loop the feeds." Warren leaned back, folding his arms. "The real challenge will be convincing the slaves to follow us. Conditioned as they are, they might not believe rescue is possible." Amira's gaze hardened. "That's where I come in. They'll listen to one of their own." Her eyes met James's across the table. The unspoken past between them, this was not just strategy, it was destiny. The shuttle slipped from the station under the cover of night, its transponder masked to resemble a routine cargo hauler. Inside, the team checked weapons gear and nerves. James sat opposite Amira, who had bound her silver hair back and donned plain tactical clothing that clung to her lithe frame. Despite the looming danger, she looked every bit the warrior she was becoming. "Ready?" James asked quietly. Her blue eyes gleamed. "I've been ready for 7 years." The shuttle touched down in a barren ravine miles from the main entrance. They moved under cover of darkness terrain, crunching softly under their boots. The maintenance shaft appeared exactly where Amira remembered, half hidden among jagged rock. "Security disabled," Talia whispered, her portable terminal blinking green. "We've got 20 minutes before the system resets." James squeezed Amira's shoulder. "Lead the way." She climbed into the shaft without hesitation, her movements sure despite the narrow space. The others followed, descending deeper into the planet's crust. The air grew heavy with mineral dust, the rumble of machinery echoing through the rock like the heartbeat of a beast. "First checkpoint," Warren murmured, peering around a corner. Two Zorian guards stood at attention, weapons slung lazily. James signaled. Talia slipped forward, releasing a small canister. A colorless gas hissed through the corridor. Within seconds, the guards slumped unconscious. "Non-lethal," Dr. Elliott confirmed, checking their vitals. "They'll wake with headaches." They pressed onward. The tunnels opened into a cavernous section lined with crude barracks. Dozens of Kalerans slept in rows of bunks, their bodies thin, their silver markings dulled with exhaustion. Amira's breath caught at the sight. James touched her arm gently. "We start here. You and Elliot wake them. Warren, Talia, and I secure the perimeter." Amira moved among her people, whispering urgently in her native tongue. At first, there was only fear, eyes widening and panic bodies recoiling from her words. But then recognition dawned. One of us. Free. The spark caught and hope spread like wildfire. "They're ready," Amira reported, her voice trembling with emotion. "But one of them knows more. He worked in administration. He says there is another facility where they take those with abilities." James's pulse quickened. "Your sister?" Amira nodded, her face taut with desperation. "It's not far. Connected by a transport tunnel." James looked to the others. New plan. "Warren, you lead the first group back to extraction. We'll take a strike team to the facility." Warren hesitated. "James." "Do it," James ordered. "Get them safe. We'll follow." The special facility was a stark contrast to the mines. Sterile corridors gleamed under harsh white light. The doors resisted even Talia's skills, their systems military grade. "Whatever's inside," she muttered, "they don't want anyone seeing it." At last the door yielded. What lay beyond chilled them all. Transparent cells lined the walls, each containing a caloran, strapped into machinery that pulsed with eerie light. Their eyes were vacant, their bodies twitching as energy siphoned from them into humming conduits. They're harvesting them, Elliot whispered, horror in his voice. Neural energy, empathic resonance. Whatever makes Calorans unique, they're draining it. Amira stumbled forward, frantic. Len, she cried, her voice breaking. Len, where are you? A weak voice answered from the far cell. Amira, is that really you? She ran, tears streaking her face until she found her sister. Len was thinner, her orange skin pale, her silver markings spreading like branching circuitry across her entire body. Her blue eyes still glowed, but with pain and fatigue. They discovered I could sense emotions, Len whispered. Predict reactions. They've been using me like a weapon. Dr. Elliot worked quickly disconnecting the tubes. She's stable but weak. We need to move. James's rage burned cold and clear. Talia, download everything. We're exposing this. But the moment the transfer began, alarms blared. Red lights bathed the corridor. Security incoming, Talia snapped. Too many to fight our way out. James made his choice instantly. Elliot, get them moving through the transport tunnel. Talia, find another exit. I'll hold them off. Amira grabbed his arm, her voice raw. No, you can't. I can, James said firmly, though. Fear gnawed at him. He cupped her cheek, forcing her to meet his eyes. Get your people out. That's what matters. The first wave of Zorian soldiers rounded the corner. James pushed Amira toward her sister. Go! He shouted, raising his weapon and unleashing a hail of covering fire. The corridor erupted into chaos. Blaster bolts scorched the walls, smoke filled the air. James fought like a man possessed, every instinct screaming to survive, but every choice aimed at buying seconds for the others. He was one man against an army, and he refused to yield. Just as his ammunition began to dwindle, the facility's lights flickered and died. Emergency systems kicked in, bathing everything in crimson glow. Confusion rippled through the Zorian ranks. Then the roar came, a defiant cry, as dozens of Calorans surged into the corridor armed with mining tools and scavenged weapons. At their front was Warren, grinning fiercely. Thought you could use backup, Captain, he shouted. First group safe, but these folks weren't leaving without their kin. The tide turned. Trapped between James's withering fire and the fury of freed slaves, the Zorian soldiers faltered, then broke. They fought their way to an emergency exit, bursting onto the planet's surface just as dawn broke. The shuttle waited, engines hot, its bay doors open wide. Inside the cramped cabin, Amira cradled her sister as the freed Calorans crowded together. Talia clutched her terminal triumph blazing in her eyes. We've got it all, she told James. The experiments, the falsified reports, the proof. The consortium is finished. James collapsed into a seat, sweat dripping down his face. For the first time since the mission began, he allowed himself a ragged breath of relief. He found Amira's gaze across the cabin. She looked at him with fierce pride, her blue eyes shimmering. You came back for me, he said, still half disbelieving. Of course we did, she answered, her voice steady. You taught us no one gets left behind. Her hand reached for his, especially not the one who showed us what freedom means. James's fingers tightened around hers. And in that moment, surrounded by the rescued, scarred but unbroken, he knew they had done more than win a battle. They had sparked a revolution. 6 months later, the gardens of the Arcturus humanitarian outpost rang with laughter. It was a sound James Hunt had not heard on Terrior 9 not once. The voices belonged to Caloran children, their orange skin glowing in the artificial sunlight, their silver markings faint but already brightening with health. They chased one another between flowering shrubs, their joy untainted by the weight of chains. James stood on the observation deck, arms folded, watching them play. The garden smelled of wet earth and blooming vines, an oasis carefully cultivated to soothe the scars of those who had lived too long underground. He felt something stir deep inside him, something close to pride, though not the kind tied to medals or commendations. Admiring your handiwork, the familiar voice warmed him before he even turned. Amira approached, her silver hair gleaming under the sun lamps, her blue eyes carrying a calm strength. She wore robes of deep cobalt embroidered with subtle silver, the formal attire of a council representative. Yet she moved with the same quiet grace as the woman who had once clung to a failing lever on a doomed dam. James smiled. Our handiwork, he corrected. He pulled her into an embrace, inhaling the faint scent that had become home to him. Amira's markings pulsed softly where his hands touched her arms, glowing with an energy that never ceased to fascinate him. She had explained once that Caloran physiology reacted to strong emotion with luminescent resonance. It was both intimate and unintentional, her body's way of telling the truth. Len is leading the healing circle today, Amira said, resting her head against his shoulder. Her empathic abilities are helping the others process their trauma. James nodded. She's stronger than anyone has the right to be. So are you, Amira said softly. He shook his head, lips brushing her hair. I just refused to look away. The strength was always in you. She leaned back to study his face. Her fingers rose, brushing the line of his jaw. And yet, when I faltered, you carried me. Don't diminish that. For a long moment, their eyes held filled with the silent understanding of survivors who had remade each other. Then Amira's lips curved into a teasing smile. Besides, you've become rather useful to have around the council chambers. They listen when you glare. James chuckled, not sure if that's a compliment or a warning. Both, she said, laughter in her eyes. The scandal had rocked the galaxy. Talia's data smuggled out of the Zorian facility under fire had been damning. Neural harvesting illegal experiments, falsified reports to the council, it was all there. The revelations forced the Galactic Council's hand. Sanctions crippled the consortium, reparations were ordered, and most importantly, the systematic liberation of all Caloran slaves had begun. The process was not easy. Politics never was. But the tide had shifted, and the Zorians could not withstand the weight of evidence and outrage. Entire convoys of freed Calorans now arrived at Arcturus and other outposts, their numbers swelling with each passing week. As for James Garou, had tried to discipline him for disobeying orders. But public opinion was a force no tribunal could ignore. The story of one human captain and one freed slave had spread like wildfire, transforming him into both hero and symbol. Garou settled for a formal reprimand and quietly reassigned him to advisory duties, though James knew the unspoken truth. They wanted him visible, but not in their chain of command. He was fine with that. His duty now was here. One evening, Amira invited him into the council chamber where Caloran representatives gathered. The room buzzed with voices, leaders debating culture, education, and rebuilding. Amira stood at the center, her presence commanding yet gentle, her words weaving hope into strategy. When she returned to James's side, her expression was alight. The council has asked me to establish a permanent cultural exchange with Earth, she said. A bridge between our people. James raised a brow. Sounds like a challenging position. Anyone in mind to serve as liaison? Amira's lips curved mischievously. She traced a finger along his jaw, her markings pulsing brighter under her touch. I was thinking of someone stubborn, passionate, surprising. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm, the same gesture that had once made her tremble in wonder. Even now it sent light racing across her skin. I might know someone who fits. They smiled at one another, a promise in the air. Later, in the quiet of their quarters, Amira sat curled beside him on the couch, her head resting on his shoulder. Outside the viewport, stars stretched endlessly, no longer symbols of captivity, but of possibility. Do you ever think about that night, she asked softly. James glanced down at her. Which night? The dam. When you asked me my name. He smiled faintly. I think about it every day. She turned her face toward him, her voice no louder than a breath. That moment changed everything. For me, for my people, for us. James's throat tightened. He pressed a kiss to her temple. For me too. Silence settled between them, not heavy but full. It was the silence of two souls resonating in harmony, a silence that needed no words. Months passed and the outpost became a beacon. Freed Calorans arrived in waves carrying scars both visible and invisible. Healing circles grew in, education programs flourished, and slowly laughter returned to a people who had nearly forgotten it. James walked the gardens one afternoon, pausing to watch a group of children drawing patterns in the dirt with sticks. Their silver markings glowed faintly in the sunlight, pulsing with excitement as they played. One of the children looked up at him and grinned. Human, the boy exclaimed in broken standard. Run with us. James laughed, shaking his head. Maybe later. But warmth filled him, spreading deeper than any victory medal could reach. From the balcony above, Amira watched him with a smile. Not all was perfect. Rumors persisted of hidden Zorian enclaves, still holding captives of resistance movements within the consortium plotting revenge. The scars of slavery could not be erased overnight, but the trajectory had changed. Hope was no longer a fragile ember. It was a flame burning brighter with each passing day. James and Amira faced it together. At council sessions, they stood as symbols human, Encaliran warrior, and survivor lovers, bound by choice rather than law. In private, they were simply themselves, a man and a woman who had found healing in each other's arms. One night, as they lay together, Amira traced the line of his jaw with her glowing fingertips. "You gave me back my life," she whispered. James caught her hand, kissed her palm. "No, you fought for it. I just reminded you it was worth fighting for." Her blue eyes softened. "Perhaps. But humans have a saying, don't they? To the stars." He smiled. "We do." "Well," she said, pressing her forehead to his, "my people have a new one now, with humans beside us." James's heart ached with quiet joy. He pulled her close, and together they gazed out at the stars, no longer boundaries, but endless horizons, waiting to be claimed. And so it was that a routine rescue mission became something greater, a spark that lit a revolution, a love that healed two broken souls, and a partnership that reshaped the destiny of an entire species. For Amira, the former slave who had reclaimed her name, and James, the human who refused to leave her behind, the universe had never seemed more full of promise.